Hello staff and students. I'm Warrant Officer 2nd Class Drishant Varma, and I'm one of your Masters of Ceremonies for our Remembrance Day Assembly. Today, we're here to remember all those who fought and gave their lives during the wars. We'd also like to recognize those that are serving in our armed forces today.
Bienvenue étudiants et facultés. Je m'appelle Caitlin Blair et je suis une de vos maîtresses de cérémonie pour notre assemblée de jour de souvenir. Aujourd'hui, nous sommes ici pour nous souvenir de tous ceux qui ont servi et qui ont donné leur vie durant la guerre. Nous aimerions aussi reconnaître ceux qui servent dans l'armée canadienne aujourd'hui.
We'll be starting today's assembly with the playing of our national anthem performed by Mr. Weber and the concert band. Everyone please stand.
You may be seated. Thank you, Mr. Weber and the concert band.
As you all know, this year due to COVID-19, we are not able to meet in person to have our assembly. Instead, we are here bringing the assembly to you virtually.
To begin, we will have Emma Bowles reading the poem In Flanders Fields.
In Flanders fields, the poppies blow, between the crosses, row on row, that mark our place, and in the sky, the larks, still bravely singing, fly, scarce hurt amid the guns below. We are the dead, short days ago, we've lived, felt dawn, saw sunset glow, loved and were loved, and now we lie in Flanders fields. Take up our quarrel with the foe, to you from failing hands we throw, the torch be yours to hold it high. If ye break faith with us who die, we shall not sleep, though poppies grow in Flanders fields.
Thank you, Emma.
We will now play our Remembrance Day video prepared by the students from the Daily War class.
My name is Major Valérie Hudon. I'm in the logistics branch of the military.
My name is Master Corporal Mackenzie. I work for Tech Services here in Gagetown.
My name is Corporal Corey Irwin. I've been in the Canadian Forces for 9 years now. I'm a vehicle technician here in base Gagetown.
My name is Corporal Glime. I'm a supply tech. I work at major equipment on base here.
My name is Sergeant Mark Ridgely, and I'm a combat engineer here at 4 Engineer Support Regiment in CFB Gagetown.
It's my father, Robert Mackenzie Hiltz, and he served overseas in World War II from 1940 or 41 to 1945.
So I have family members that have served in World War I and II. I have family members buried all over the world. So I guess it was family tradition and to do my part.
It was a cousin who had served in World War II. He was Father Hickey. It was the first He was with the first wave of the North Shore Regiment that went ashore on the beaches of Normandy. And when I visited there a few years ago, they actually have stories and letters written by him about how he took care of the men under his command. He called them his boys because he was their padre.
It was in Vimy Ridge where Canada basically became a nation. It was the first time we fought with all 4 divisions together. We fought under our own leadership. We were not being beholden to the British or Americans at the time. We fought as a nation for the first time. And the accomplishment that we did at Vimy Ridge, we were the first army to take that. And I think that's an accomplishment. Considering we were a new nation, that's a pretty considerable accomplishment.
One of the stories my father likes to tell is when he was growing up in Belgium, it was during the Second World War, and he had a German soldier that was actually living in his house with him because they suspected his father of being in the underground, which he was, but they never caught him. But he remembers how wonderful it felt when they saw the Canadian troops going through his town.
But one of the things I found that really kind of sent a chill through me was we got to this island, and the first thing I kicked, I thought it was a shell, but it was actually a water canteen, an American water canteen in perfect condition. Still had the top on it and the chain connecting everything. I looked at the bottom, and the timestamp said 1943, which was around the time they would have been there, in addition to there was a bullet hole through it. Right, so I was literally holding history.
I think it would be the very first. Formed up on a parade, we came around a corner, and that's where we were supposed to form up in front of the crowd. For some reason, the crowd cheered for us. Felt like a rock star, and it was a good feeling on such a somber day to have so many people giving such respect to you purely for wearing the uniform and keeping up its traditions and carrying on as such.
You can stand there in the cold and be miserable, but on that day, nothing bothers you. It could be raining, could be snowing, could be freezing cold, could be minus 40. But for that hour to 2 hours you're standing there, it doesn't bother you, because that's the one day of the year that should be the most important to every soldier across Canada.
I completely understand the sacrifice that they made and those that did not come home, why it's important that we remember that. So for me, it's always an emotional time, but I think it's still important that we do this every year and remember, because if not, everything they would have done would be for waste.
I'm very proud of what he did and how he served. I know he came back with a lot of demons, but very proud of his contribution.
Like it's one of those things where you obviously always cherish the memories of people that came before you and paid the ultimate sacrifice. We're, like I said, we're a part of something bigger than themselves. For myself now, people would consider it the same thing going to Afghanistan, and to an extent I feel it's true. But there's also those of us that came home that are still fighting the war, right? So it's important that we don't just take one day to remember everybody. We remember everybody every day. We appreciate what good they did in the world when good had to be done.
Remembrance Day to me is, obviously it's a day for remembrance, a day for mourning. Every Canadian we've lost in every major conflict. But I believe that it's also a day of celebration. It's important that we celebrate the lives that we've lost, the way that they lived. I know from my family members that I've lost, they gave their lives for a cause that they truly believed in, and I believe that should be celebrated. Right? So it's remembrance, mourning, and celebration for me.
I think it's an important job that needs to be done, and Canada has always done a very good job for standing up for people who can't stand up for themselves.
A big part for me is being a part of something that's bigger than myself and trying to make the world a bit of a better place than when I first got here. So, yeah, that's why I joined the military.
In Flanders fields, the poppies blow. Between the crosses, row on row.
That mark our place, and in the sky,
the larks, still bravely singing, fly.
Scarce heard amid the guns below. We are the dead. Short days ago we lived,
felt dawn, saw sunset glow.
Loved and were loved, and now we lie in Flanders fields.
Take up our quarrel with the foe.
To you from failing hands we throw the torch. Be yours to hold it high.
If ye break faith with us who die, we shall not sleep.
Though poppies grow in Flanders fields.
Thank you to the Daily World class and Mr. Carson for the beautiful video.
On November 11, 1999, Terry Kelly was in a drugstore in Dartmouth, Nova Scotia. At 10:55 a.m., an announcement came on the store's PA asking customers who would still be on the premises at 11 a.m. to give 2 minutes of silence to respect the veterans who have sacrificed so much for us.
Terry was impressed with the store's leadership role in adapting the Legion's 2 minutes of silence initiative. He felt that the store's contribution of educating the public to the importance of remembering was commendable.
When 11 o'clock arrived on that day, an announcement was again made for the 2 minutes of silence to commence. All customers, with the exception of a man who was accompanied by his young son, showed their respect.
Terry's anger toward the father for trying to engage the store's clerk in conversation and for setting a bad example for his child was channeled into a beautiful piece of work called A Pittance of Time, which will now be sung and played by Miss Ramirez and Allie Dunfield.
To accompany the video, we will show photos of New Brunswick veterans who have fought for our nation.
They fought and some died for their homeland. They fought and some died, now it's our land. Look at his little child, there's no fear in her eyes. Could he not show respect for other dads who have died? Take 2 minutes, would you mind? It's a pittance of time for the boys and the girls who went over. In peace may they rest, may we never forget why they died. It's a pittance of time. God forgive me for wanting to strike him. Give me strength so as not to be like him. My heart pounds in my breast, fingers pressed to my lips. My throat wants to bawl out, my tongue barely resists, but 2 minutes I will bide. It's a pittance of time for the boys and the girls who went over. In peace may they rest, may we never forget why they died. It's a pittance of time.
We would now like to show you this video created by the Department of National Defence of Canada on Remembrance Day.
It's 1916. 800 young Newfoundlanders head towards the front line. They fight bravely through barbed wires and a firestorm. The next morning, only 68 answer the roll call. A community loses a generation.
That same year, hundreds of Black Canadians come together as members of the No. 2 Construction Battalion. Many had been denied the opportunity to fight for their country because of the color of their skin, but they refuse to take no for an answer. Even then, they are only allowed to be part of a segregated, non-combatant unit. After the war is done, they do not receive the full recognition they deserve until a century later. A country is denied its heroes.
It's 1951 in the heat of the Korean War. Canadian forces are under attack. Noel Knockwood, a residential school survivor from the Sabaganagadi First Nation, fires his 105mm howitzer against the enemy. He's only 18 years old, and he serves in Korea for 413 days. He comes home and begins his lifelong work to promote and protect Mi'kmaq heritage and spirituality. A community gains a pillar.
It's 1956, and conflict has escalated between Egypt, France, the United Kingdom, and Israel over the Suez Canal. With the region in crisis, the United Nations calls for a ceasefire and withdrawal of foreign forces. They create the first United Nations emergency force. It is led by a Canadian peacekeeper named Tommy Burns. A country gains a new part of its identity.
Our history is not just dates and key battles. It is not just victories and defeats. Our history is people. It is their duty, honor, integrity, and courage. It is the people who came home forever changed by the grim realities of war. It is the ones who made the ultimate sacrifice in the pursuit of a better world, a world where everyone can be free, a world that follows the rule of law, and upholds human rights. A world where all people are treated with dignity and respect.
This Veterans Week, we remember the sailors patrolling the perilous seas, navigating bravely despite the danger of hidden German U-boats. We remember the soldiers crawling through the mud, bracing enemy fire. We remember the aviators flying out into the night, dodging enemy spotters and hoping that their planes would make it through. We remember the nurses saving lives while putting their own on the line. We remember the people on the home front making munitions and ensuring that our forces overseas had the supplies they needed to stay alive.
And we remember that conflict did not end with the First and Second World Wars. Over the decades, Canada's military members have continued to answer the call to save lives, protect peace, and uphold security and stability in the world. Most recently, over 40,000 Canadian Armed Forces members served in Afghanistan between 2001 and 2014, risking their lives to help people in need. Although our military is not involved in any combat missions today, we proudly remember the contributions of those who made the ultimate sacrifice. When I hear veteran stories, I am inspired to be a better Canadian, a better person. I want to live up to their example.
I am inspired by people like Major Lynn Doucette, an air weapons controller. She was deployed to the Persian Gulf in 1991 and worked in an American air base in Turkey. There, she commanded a U.S. airborne warning and control system aircraft. She kept a careful eye on the enemy and reported what she saw on the radar to the generals on the ground. She recommended what actions they should take, but she faced significant barriers as a woman in uniform. Local cultural restrictions at the Turkish airbase banned women from entering the operation centers. She was denied her seat at the table due to her gender, but she was undeterred and performed her duties with excellence and bravery. Her work and that of her comrades in arms was key to maintaining control over the sky during the Persian Gulf War.
Today, Canadian Armed Forces members work at sea, on the ground, and in the air to protect and defend our country, and to support our allies across the globe. There are missions in Europe, the Middle East, and the Asia Pacific, and it's all about making the world safer. As Canadians, we can take a lot of pride in being a reliable friend and in working together, especially with our NATO allies.
We also help make the seas safer by stopping traffickers. Earlier this year, a Canadian ship broke records when it seized 2,835 pounds of heroin off the coast of Oman. Those drugs would have hurt people, and the money made from selling them would have gone to criminal groups. The Navy has done a lot of really great work in the Middle East, as well as in the Caribbean and Eastern Pacific Ocean, to stop these smugglers. And Canada helps make sure that the ocean is safe for ships to travel. When so many of the things we love travel by boat, that's a really important responsibility.
In countries like Ukraine, Iraq, and Lebanon, Canada supports local security forces. We help them develop the skills they need to build and maintain long-term peace and stability. Canadians are also supporting United Nations peacekeeping operations. That includes flying people, equipment, and supplies where they are needed for UN operations in Africa.
Here at home, you may have seen military members right in your community. They are there helping out with floods, fires, ice storms, and COVID-19. No matter what happens, their job is to work hard to keep you and your community safe. Maybe you've seen helicopters or planes flying overhead, or if you walk past a massive steel-hulled ship docked at the ports. Or the highway, you've passed by some big green trucks driving all together. Maybe you have someone in your family who is in the military, or your neighbor is a veteran.
We all have different connections to Veterans Week, and we have different ways of showing our gratitude. A wreath-laying ceremony, reciting a poem, wearing a poppy, listening to a podcast, calling up a relative, and asking to hear their stories.
I want to thank you for taking the time to be part of this Veterans Week event. Thank you for remembering their stories and their sacrifices. Together, we celebrate the lives of those who made it home, who survived to have families and to grow old. And we honor those who did not. We remember the thousands of people, past and present, who put their lives on the line in defense of our country, our people, and our values, lest we forget.
We will now have Mr. Weber and the concert band, along with solos performed by the following students: Marielle Reyes, Charlotte Flynn, Ben Todd Sweezy, Anna Hackett, Graham Goodwin, Jolie Wrench, perform a piece called Purple Heart.
Purple Heart is a powerful and dramatic musical setting written in tribute to composer David Schaefer's former student, Lieutenant Corporal Michael Kufantz, who along with 14 other Marines from the Columbus, Ohio-based Lima Company of the 3rd Battalion, 25th Marines, were killed on August 3, 2005 in a roadside attack in Iraq. The subdued sonorities of the horns are blended with the subtleties of the mallet percussion, creating a compassionate and stirring setting appropriate for any concert setting.
Thank you, Mr. Weber and the concert band.
We would now like to show you another video created by the Department of National Defense.
Canada's military history is more than just dates and battles. Our history is people. For more than 100 years, Canada's sailors, soldiers, aviators, and special forces have risked their lives for one common goal: building a better world. Some have served overseas, protecting our allies and upholding the rights and freedoms of others. Some have helped out in their communities in times of need, after fires, floods, or throughout the pandemic. Each one has a unique story.
Veterans Week is a time to remember their service and their sacrifice, a time to remember their selflessness and their unwavering belief in democracy and peace. I'm so honored to share some of their stories with you today. Stories that inspire me to be a better member of the military, a better Canadian, and a better person.
I want you to imagine this. It's 1916. You're a young person full of energy. You've left your family back home in Newfoundland and are now in France, near the village of Beaumont-Hamel. You're ready to fight to bring peace and safety back to Europe. It's July 1st, and you and 800 of your comrades in arms advance towards the front line. You continue to fight as those beside you fall. You keep pressing forward long into the night. The next morning, only you and 67 others from your regiment answer the roll call. 700 brave troops are not with you that morning. Some are missing, some are wounded, and some will never answer the call again. That is the terrible cost of war. Over 62,000 Canadians died in the First World War, including roughly 1,300 soldiers from the Dominion of Newfoundland, who proudly served in their regiment, as Newfoundland was not yet a Canadian province.
We remember their incredible sacrifices and the sacrifices of those who were injured or struggled with their mental health when they came home. But we must also recognize that not everyone was allowed to serve equally, like the members of the No. 2 Construction Battalion. In the early years of the First World War, many Black Canadians were denied entry into the Canadian military because of the color of their skin. They refused to take no for an answer, and in 1916, volunteers all, they were allowed to serve as part of a segregated, non-combatant unit in France. Their determination to serve their country despite the biases that they had faced is something we should never forget.
Thankfully, the soldiers of No. 2 Construction Battalion are finally receiving the recognition they were due over 100 years ago. Their story is one of tremendous courage and valor in the face of hate and discrimination. It is an example of the resilience, selflessness, and dedication of those who have fought for our country. And it is a reminder that we still have work to do to fight against racism and injustice here at home.
We must also remember our veterans who served in the Second World War. Soldiers like Warrant Officer Second Class John Robert Osborne, who led his company to recapture Mount Butler during the defense of Hong Kong in 1941. They charged with their bayonets and they seized the summits from the Japanese forces. But by mid-afternoon, they were surrounded and running low on ammunition and supplies. As bullets and grenades rained down on them, John Osborne courageously picked up many of the live Japanese grenades and threw them back at the enemy. But there was one he could not get to in time. He yelled for his platoon to clear the area, pushed his men aside, and threw himself on the explosive. He was killed instantly. His courage saved many lives, and he was posthumously awarded the Victoria Cross for his valor.
10 years later, and a few thousand kilometers away, roughly 700 Canadians would help defend a force of 5,000 Chinese soldiers at Cap Yeong during the Korean War. They were outnumbered, but not outmatched. They fought valiantly, and they persevered. While the Battle of Cap Yeong was on land, Canadians in Korea also served in the air and on the seas. In the skies, they destroyed enemy jet fighters and transported people and much-needed cargo.
And on the water, sailors like Ted Jamieson, an Indigenous Canadian Armed Forces member from the Six Nations Upper Cayuga Band, helped patrol the coasts, disrupt enemy supplies, and conduct a surveillance. Chief Petty Officer First Class Jamieson was an expert in anti-submarine warfare and deployed to Korea on HMCS Iroquois. He was on board Iroquois when the ship was attacked on October 2nd, 1952. An attack that led to the Royal Canadian Navy's only battle casualties during the Korean conflict. He survived and came home to share his vast knowledge with others as a senior instructor at the artillery school in Halifax.
Shortly after the Korean War, the United Nations launched its first large-scale peacekeeping effort in response to the Suez Crisis. In November of 1956, Canadian forces joined 9 other countries in the Middle East as part of the first United Nations emergency force. Their efforts helped end the crisis and brought peace to the region for the next 10 years. The early 90s, Canadian Armed Forces returned to the Middle East, serving in the Gulf War. This year marks the 30th anniversary of the end of that conflict.
More than 4,000 Canadians served in the Persian Gulf region from 1990 to 1991, including Major Lynn Doucette, an air weapons controller from Ingonish Beach, Nova Scotia. She deployed to the Persian Gulf in 1991 and was posted to an American air base in Turkey. There, she commanded a U.S. airborne warning and control system aircraft. She kept a careful eye on the enemy and reported what she saw on the radar to the generals on the ground. She recommended what actions they should take. But she faced significant barriers as a woman in uniform. Local cultural restrictions at the Turkish airbase banned women from entering the operation centers. She was denied her seat at the table due to her gender, but she was undeterred and continued to perform her duty with excellence and bravery. Her work and that of her comrades in arms was the key to maintaining control over the sky during the Persian Gulf War.
We've answered the call time and time again. Following the attacks on September 11, 2001, we began our combat operations in Afghanistan. Over 40,000 Canadian Armed Forces members fought bravely to help the people of that country in their time of need. Besides the dangers of combat, the conditions were harrowing and left lasting scars on many who served. They faced extreme heat, dust storms, and the constant threat of roadside bombs or other explosive device.
158 Canadian military members made the ultimate sacrifice, including Captain Nicola Goddard. She was a strong leader and a respected officer who believed in building a better world for others. And she remains an inspiration to those who serve today.
Today, I and other people like me carry on the legacy of those who came before us, working on the ground, in the air, and at sea. Our operations across the globe are all about supporting our allies and partners. And here at home, when disaster strikes, we're always ready to help Canadians in need. No matter what, we find a way to help. We adapt, we learn, and we take on new roles. Because at the end of the day, that's why we joined the Canadian Armed Forces, to defend Canada and Canadians, to do good in the world, to live a life of purpose and meaning.
So whenever you can, I encourage you to reflect on the efforts of our Canadian Armed Forces members, both past and present. Celebrate the lives of those who made it home, who survived to have families and to grow old. Honor those who did not. And remember that today, there are thousands of members who put their lives on the line in defense of our country, our people, and our values. Lest we forget. Thank you.
We have now come to the most solemn part of our assembly. During times of war and peace, soldiers paused at the beginning and end of each day to remember those who have fallen. We ask that you please stand in your classes while the last post will be played on the trumpet by Elliot Nason and remain standing for the following 2 minutes of silence and the act of remembrance.
During the 2 minutes of silence, we ask you to remember all those who did not come home and those who are still away today. Luke Carson will read the act of remembrance. Please stand in your classes now.
They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun, and in the morning, we will remember them.
You may be seated. Nous sommes rendus à la fin de notre cérémonie de jour de souvenir. Pendant les prochains jours, nous vous encourageons de penser aux soldats du passé, du présent et du futur qui sont battus et se battent encore pour nous.
We have now come to the end of our Remembrance Day ceremony. This Remembrance Day, we ask you to think about the soldiers of the past, the present, and the future who fought and still fight for us. They selflessly risked their lives and futures. We also encourage you to visit the cenotaphs throughout the city to pay your respects. Thank you, Fredericton High School.
Time